Scream and shout with all your might.
Scream, shout, whine, cry, whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter.
Dig in your heels and hold on tight.
Dig in, hold on. You know the deal by now.
Either you are wrong or I am right.
That's right, it's me, Skippy, stating the obvious, where you know that you are wrong and that I am right. That was a good little break. It is still the 5th of August, 14:35 hours for those of you in the military. For those of you who are civilians, subtract 12. It's complicated, I know. We are still talking about utilitarianism, though we're getting near the end. Theoretically, this is the second to the last in the series. The email address here, as always, is sto@204eastsouth.com. If you think I'm wrong about something, feel free to let me know. I'll be more than happy to explain to you why I'm not only right, but why I am always right, without fail. You know, Randy, that's the advantage of living in your own little fantasy world, is that you can always be right. Hey, why not? It works for Spear. In the control room, the lovely, the adorable, the meat-eating, the Republican, but we're not going to hold that against her for the moment, Randy. Right. Okay, where are we? We are at an application of utilitarianism, the movie Extreme Measures. Now, for those of you who have not seen the movie Extreme Measures, I am not going to be talking about what happened. I'm not going to be giving you a summary. You're just going to have to cope with it. I'm going to speak as if you have seen the movie, so if you want to be up on this, you're going to have to go see the bloody movie. Yeah, I don't have time to do movie summaries here, nor do I have the interest, quite honestly, in doing movie summaries here. The first question is, if you're going to do what the doctor does in this movie, if you're going to conduct your experiment on human beings, how do you... Now I'm trying to think if I can put this in context of the movie, or if I was thinking about the context of reality. Okay, if you are going to, in the real world, do experiments on human beings, medical experiments on the spines of human beings, the question becomes, how do you decide what human beings you're going to do this on? Now, in the movie, of course, his test subjects were homeless people that he essentially kidnapped off the street and conducted his experiments on without their consent, without their permission, without anybody knowing about it. If in the real world we're going to do experiments on other people, how exactly would a person go about deciding who they're going to kidnap and do this to? Now keep in mind, we're discussing this in the context of utilitarianism. The utilitarian argument here is that it's okay to do these experiments on these few people because in the end it's going to benefit many other people who are not able to walk. It's going to benefit them by giving us the medical knowledge necessary, medical knowledge necessary to repair their spines and allow them to walk again. The second point, and this harkens back to a lot of what I think utilitarianism is all about. And this takes us back to the animal rights wackoism dispute too. In the movie, he had to motivate people by preying on the weak, by people with crippled family members, and by people who felt guilt. He was being assisted, the doctor who was doing these experiments on these people was being assisted by a number of people. We saw the FBI agent who was helping him had a person in his family who had a broken back and was crippled. The local detective of the police force was in the same scenario. His little son couldn't walk. And this nurse who was helping him We saw that her brother was in a wheelchair, and her brother was in a wheelchair because he was in a car accident, and she was the one driving the car, and she was drunk at the time. So this doctor who's performing these experiments on these people against their will, without their consent, has surrounded himself with people who are helping him because they all have something to gain from it. That is to say, in each of their cases, there is a family member of theirs who, if these experiments work, is going to be made to walk again. In the case of the nurse, at least, we know that she's also motivated by guilt because she felt bad because she was the one driving the car when her brother got killed. So there's a couple of levels we need to look at this on. First of all, except I just forgot what one of those levels was, and I really hate when I do that. Randy, do you have any clue where I was going? No, I know where the other one was, but okay, first of all, this is the same thing. Now, it'll come to me. Don't worry about it. This is the same thing as what the animal rights wackos do, is motivating people with emotions by preying on weak people who have, just as this doctor goes out and finds people who are easy to manipulate because they have people in their families who are paralyzed, animal rights wackos go out looking for people who are easy to manipulate because, I don't know, they're stupid or something. I think the main problem I have with this is that if you're a scientist and you have to go out looking for people who are emotionally sympathetic to your cause, and this isn't even if you're a scientist, this applies to like the animal rights wackos also. If you have to go out looking for people who are going to be emotionally predisposed to go for your cause, I think this says something that you can't go looking for people who are going to be intellectually predisposed to agree with your cause. In the fact that he couldn't go to other doctors or researchers who were not vulnerable and easy to manipulate and say, look, this is what I'm doing, why don't you help me? I think that says a lot. I mean, when you have to essentially prey on people who are emotionally and psychologically vulnerable and because of their own stupid mistakes or their own personal conditions, I think that's an indication that you're screwing up on some level. Number 3, could you get volunteers if the test subjects are heroes? Then I'm sure you could. This debate came up in the class. It was in the movie. The doctor, Gene Hackman, refers to these people he's experimenting on as heroes because, they're doing so much, and all this other crap. My point would be that if this was actually some kind of hero status, then why can't they be given the choice to be heroes? And more to the point, we brought up, would people volunteer for this? And there was some dissension there, and I maintain that there are people who, if you told them, who are already paralyzed, remember in the movie, he's taking people who are essentially healthy and cutting sections out of their spine and then putting it back together. So he's mutilating people who are healthy, which goes back to the whole thing I talked about way in the beginning about how doctors should not be hurting people. And he is then repairing them. If he went out and said, hey, look, I'm looking for volunteers to try this on, I'm sure that he would be more than capable of getting people who already have spinal injuries who would volunteer and take a chance on being able to walk. Because, what are you going to do? Be paralyzed more? I'm paralyzed from the neck down. What's going to happen? I'm going to get paralyzed from the neck down? Duh. There's not too much further you can go. Also, did I write? No, I did not write that, so I'll put it in here. I think there's also the point that there was some disagreement with me on this also, but of course, as always, I am right, and people who disagree with me are wrong. But there is a difference between taking a person, cutting their spine in half, and then the next day putting it back together, and taking a person whose spine was broken, 10 years ago, and fixing that. Simply because, if nothing else, you got to figure the nerves below the break on somebody who broke their spine, severed their spinal cord. You got to get the right terminology here. The nerves of somebody who severed whose spinal cord. God, I cannot talk. The nerves of a person whose spinal cord was severed, say, for example, 10 years ago, the nerves on the opposite side of that sever from the brain are going to some way or another, be degenerated and atrophied. I mean, I don't know exactly how, but surely that's got to take place. I mean, there are going to be physiological differences in the nerves, in the muscles, all these other things, between somebody whose back has been broken for 10 years and somebody whose back you broke last night. So I'm not necessarily sure that experiments of this type done on these people are going to necessarily be medically valid. One more argument against going out and picking up random people and using them for this. The argument was made in the movie that it was okay to use these homeless people because no one cares about these people. And there were some interesting things brought up in the class about, while saying that it was said that our society may not care about these people, these homeless people, but these homeless people had amongst themselves their own society. And so here's a question for the utilitarian perspective: is creating the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest amount of people in whose society? In our quote-unquote society, in the big mainstream society? Or what about the amount of happiness in the society of these homeless people who are living on the street? Is another example of where utilitarianism delves too much into opinions. We also brought up there's a difference between not caring about people and actively harming them. This is a distinction that I would definitely make. They said that it was okay to experiment on these homeless people because nobody cares about them. And I'm saying, well, there's lots of people out there that I don't care about personally, but I'm not going to go out on my way and harm these people because you can't care about everybody on the planet Earth, even though utilitarian animal rights wackos think you can. Except, of course, unless they're white men or Republicans or Christians or, speechwriters for George Bush or whatever. Those people you don't have to care about. But the point is, nobody can care about everybody on Earth. And there's a difference between simply not caring about a person and actively harming them. If our society is going to not care about homeless people, that's one thing, and you can say that to what extent or another this is unethical or immoral or what the hell ever, but this is a long way from saying, well, we're going to go out and just shoot homeless people for fun. This is actively harming them. This is clearly morally wrong. I'm not sure that there is a moral incorrectness in indifference. Excuse me. And of course, we got to we brought along some real-life examples of similar things. We talked about the Nazi experiments done on the Jews. And of course, there's also the Tuskegee experiment, which I'm sure I've mentioned at some point in this already. In both of those cases, you had governments doing medical experiments on human beings against their will. And the point was brought up, just like at the end of the movie, of course, the main character is given all of the research data from the doctor's experiments on these humans. And we don't know what he does with it, because that's where the movie ends. And so that's the moral question, is what do you do with this information? And I will submit that my answer was that the information should be used. You should acknowledge where it came from, and you should acknowledge that the source of it was morally questionable. But some people said you should destroy the information because of where it came from. And my point on that would be that if you destroy the information, then these people really were killed for nothing. I mean, as it is, they were killed, they were tortured, they were, treated inhumanely, blah, blah, blah. And these things are wrong. But at least, I don't want to say at least, let me think about how to phrase this. In the process, this information was gathered, and this information could be used for good things, for the betterment of society further down the line. If this information, so there was, in a sense, a point to the suffering they went through. If that information is destroyed, then that means there was absolutely no point to the suffering they went through at all. And don't misinterpret. When I say, and let's apply this, let's take it away from the movie and let's apply it to the Jews that the Nazis did all these experiments on. If we took the information from those experiments and were able to use it and learn from it and improve conditions and situations for people in the world, then at least some good came of that. If that information is destroyed, then that means that those people were tortured and suffered and died for absolutely nothing. And being able to use that information, even though it was acquired in an unethical, immoral way, being able to use it at least gives their suffering and their situation some type of meaning in a larger context. And of course the danger here is that people can say, and I see how they can say this, people can say, well, that's a justification. And so if it's okay to do it then it's okay to do it any other time. And I see that is a very dangerous thing. So if you're going to say, well, how does one control this? That's a good question. And it's beyond the scope of what I want to talk about now. Well, and also because, I don't exactly have it mapped out. I mean, essentially just it amounts to people who in a position to do these type of experiments have to police themselves and not do this sort of thing. When we catch somebody doing this, if we, for example, caught a doctor doing experiments on people without their permission and all this other stuff, we just need to take the guy out and shoot him in the fucking head and send a message to other people who might consider doing the same thing that it won't be tolerated. We should still use the information he's gathered, and we should somehow compensate the people he did this to, but the doctor who did it should be killed. It's that simple. I think that's probably a condensed version. I could expand on all of that, but that's good enough. Bringing it home, what about animal experimentation? Because to some extent this movie also concerned the morals of animal testing, because we're saying, well, we experiment on animals, why can't we experiment on people? It brought up a couple of issues. First of all, does experimenting on animals apply to people? Now, I'm going to say not always so. You certainly always hear these things, well, such and such causes cancer in lab rats. Well, that's great, but I'm not a lab rat. Neither is anybody else. While animal experimentation is valuable in some cases, there are also some cases where it's fairly meaningless. There is... Ooh, I just ummed. You also have to keep in mind a lot of this happens because of the FDA. Remember, the FDA... Wait, I'm reading my notes. What are the way of going to animals? Huh? Right. So this is one of my favorite things about experimentation, about drugs, about doing... The FDA says you've got to do all these experiments on animals and blah, blah, blah. The FDA always comes out with these things, and they'll come along and some new drug will finally come out, and the FDA will announce, this drug is going to save 5,000 lives a year. And it took us 5 years to approve the drug. So does it ever occur to anybody that if it can save 5,000 lives a year, and it took them 5 years of fucking around to approve the drug so that people can use it, that means the FDA just murdered 25,000 people. If they would have just approved the damn thing 5 years ago, those 25,000 people would be alive. And why can't we experiment on people instead of experimenting on animals? And we can experiment on people, but we have to experiment on animals first. And why? For one thing, it's because of federal laws, but it's also because of the Geneva Convention. So when you're sitting here and somebody's talking about doing an experiment on a lab animal, and you're getting offended because you're an animal rights wacko, remember, it's because of the government that you want to give control of healthcare to, and it's because of the Geneva Convention, which you think is great, that these things happen. In conclusion, We're getting near the end of this. I'm so happy. Well, yeah, we still got to do the debate one. We may take a lunch break between this, too. We may go eat some more dead animal. Well, yeah, lunch. It's 3 o'clock. We're a little late for lunch. James Rachels is a utilitarian. You can read his shit. Let me read his stuff here. This is what James Rachels writes in his book. It's in the notes, and there's also a link to the text on the internet. Could it be, for example, that future generations will look back in disgust at the way affluent people in the 21st century enjoyed their comfortable lives, while third world children died of easily preventable diseases? Or at the way we slaughtered and ate helpless animals? If so, they might note that the utilitarian philosophers of the day were criticized as simple-minded for advancing a moral theory that straightforwardly condemned such things. Here we see the typical utilitarian, communist, socialist, progressive, pinko mindset. Will the future look back on us and condemn us because we lived comfortable lives while these children died of diseases? Well, all of these utilitarians who believe this shit. James Rachels is here in America. I'm sure he has a nice house. He's making a lot of money off his stupid little book that costs $70 a pop. I don't see him feeding any little children. Or the way we slaughtered and ate helpless animals. Well, if they do, tough shit. And are utilitarians criticized for being simple-minded? Yeah, I do it all the time, because they are simple-minded, and because their philosophy doesn't have anything to do with all this crap they think it does. It has to do with power, and it has to do with their personal opinions. Again, I'm telling you, you want to tell me under utilitarianism that killing an animal and eating it is wrong, you got to show me the calculus of felicity. Until you can do that, I don't give a shit. It's just your opinion. Utilitarianism is supposed to be about scientifically validatable, scientifically validatable measurements of happiness, which are calculated and applied in order to do that which will create the greatest amount of happiness. Let's see. Let me just read my notes here in my response to James Rachel's little sentences there. Well, Jimmy boy, you could be right, or you could be attempting to move people with emotion because you know utilitarianism is flawed. And again, this is just like the animal rights wacko films. What does he have to do? He has to drag up there's third world children dying. We're slaughtering and eating helpless animals. Oh my God, it's pure emotionalism. A helpless animal. I don't know if I'd necessarily call a cow completely helpless. You piss a cow off, it'll kick the shit out of you, and you'll be picking your nuts up off the floor. I've been around cows. You ever been chased by a bull? I have. They're not fucking helpless, buddy. If you care about third world, let me continue reading my notes here. If you care about third world children so much, then help them. Gosh, how much could John Kerry help third world children by selling his yacht, his jet airplane, and 3 of his 4 mansions and using that money to feed those children? Yet this doesn't happen. But it's okay because Kerry is a Democrat, and Rachel's, I'll bet money, votes straight party Democrat like a complete idiot. And remember, too, it's all about, we talked about this earlier, it's all about the food is here. If you care about those third world children so much, do something to help those countries build an infrastructure so that they can get food over there and get it distributed. Stop whining about how it's my fault that those people are starving, because I don't care. So this is another problem with utilitarians. And Speer admitted this as much himself in the debate, that he's not going to do anything about these problems. It came up somewhere in the context of, if you don't like animals being killed or something, what are you doing about it? He said, I'm not doing anything about it. So, all of these utilitarians are just sissy-ass little crybaby whiny fuckers that they don't want to get off their ass and do anything about starving children in the third world. They want other people to be forced to change what they're doing and do something about starving people in the third world. It's all about power. It's all about forcing you to do things. It's all about forcing you to adhere to their morality. It's all about legislating morality, which is exactly what they love to say cannot be done. Utilitarianism is not about helping children in third world countries. Otherwise, utilitarians would do that. Utilitarianism is about forcing other people to help children in third world countries. Utilitarianism is about increasing government power. Utilitarianism is about legislating morality. Utilitarianism is about slavery. Utilitarianism is about the destruction of individual freedom for the greater good. Utilitarianism is about forcing others to do what you think is right. I wrote legislating morality. See, I'm repeating myself even in the notes. This is my favorite one. Utilitarianism is about doing what you want to do while pretending you are doing what's best for everyone. Ethical egoism is about doing what you want to do and being honest about it. This is my main huge contention with utilitarians, just as it is my huge contention with progressives / Democrats / communists / liberals, whatever you call them this week. Is these people have an agenda, but they don't have the spine to just be honest about it. As to eating the poor little animals, plants get eaten, animals get eaten, we all get eaten, even the lion and the tiger and the human are eventually food for the worms and the insects. That's life and death. This actually came up in the thing too, as to whether or not, in the debate, as to whether or not humans are part of the food cycle. And one of the animal science ladies down there said that humans are part of the food chain. Spear acted surprised by this. This was news to him. He argued with this. I'm like, what planet the fuck are you on? We are part of the food chain, jackass. These people have some bizarre idea that we are somehow removed from the world around us, even though we live here. I mean, yeah, we may live in houses and have air conditioning and drive SUVs and talk on our little cell phones until we can't shut up anymore. But we are still part of the food chain, whether you like it or not. There's no getting out of it. We're stuck in it. How do we know the animals don't want to be eaten? I always think about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, when they're at the restaurant in the end of the universe and they bring out the animal on the plate that wants to be eaten. And poor little Arthur Dent, he can't believe it because it looks kind of like a cow. The animal's laying there on the plate going, "Oh, eat me. I have been fattening myself up. I'm going to be so tender. I'll be the best meal you ever had." You know, I always wonder, because with bioengineering coming, we have two possibilities here that will put the animal rights wackos into a tailspin. What if we engineer an animal that is essentially brainless with any type of higher functions? As far as higher functions go, simply has enough brain to maintain body functions and keep it alive. Can we eat that without violating some moral law according to the animal rights wackos? On the other hand, maybe this ties into Spear's retarded children thing too. I haven't talked about that really, Spears and his retard burgers. What if we engineer an animal that is intelligent enough that it can decide it wants to be eaten? Because remember, if you make the animal intelligent, just like you can condition a dog to fetch a stick. I mean, you could easily condition, say for instance, retarded people, because Spear brought up, well, if we can eat animals, can we eat retarded people? Could we breed retarded people and kill them and eat them and make retard burgers? No, and there you go. What if we did? What if we bred retarded people, and because of their limited intelligence and intellect, we could condition them to want to be eaten, and then they would be happy being eaten. So would that be okay? Because that, after all, utilitarianism, it's about happiness. If a creature wants to be eaten by something else, that's going to cause it happiness when that end is fulfilled and it's killed and eaten. Hey, I'm not the one who came up with a retard burger. Spear came up with the retard burger. I like it, though. I'm going to use it in the future. I think it's funny, and I also think it's interesting. What about plants? Why is it okay to eat plants? You know, everybody assumes that because plants just stay in one place and don't move, that it's okay to eat them. I mean, clearly plants are alive. If you eat a plant, you're killing something. I think the arguments are made on the level of, well, plants aren't intelligent. And that takes me back to, well, if we just breed animals that aren't intelligent, is it okay to eat them? And of course, the eco-wackos, tree-hugging animal rights wackos are going to say no, because they still feel pain. It also seems to me it wouldn't be that hard to genetically engineer animals that don't feel pain. There's also the problem of you can't say that plants don't feel pain because plants do feel pain. When you can hook up, you can measure, I don't know the exact terminologies here either, and I do have a couple of books on this actually that I'm going to delve into. If they were in the studio, I'd tell you the titles of them. They have, for example, hooked up essentially EKG machines to tomato plants and pulled the tomatoes off, and the tomatoes respond to the damage to them from having the tomato pulled off. So to say that plants don't feel pain, well, okay, plants don't have a nervous system as we understand it, and maybe they don't feel pain in exactly the way we understand it, but if you go up to a plant and you rip one of its branches off, it certainly the plant itself certainly does have a response. It's not like the plant as a biological organism is completely oblivious to the fact that it's just had part of its body ripped away. I always think about I had a plant biology teacher many years ago who absolutely hated vegetarians because they were guilty of speciesism. He even hated vegetarians more than he hated Republicans, and he hated Republicans a lot. He used to love to go off about Ronald Reagan. But so yeah, I don't understand the logic in saying you can eat a plant but you can't eat an animal. Oh, that reminds me. I wonder. I gotta look through my notes. All right. Anyway. What am I? I mentioned here that Rachel's references eating animals, but he doesn't say anything about experimenting on animals. I think animal rights wackos love animal experimentation deep down inside, because these are the same people who love to say, well, such and such must be banned because it causes cancer in lab rats. And if we didn't have animal experimentation, they wouldn't be able to say such and such must be banned because it causes cancer in lab rats. I think despite all this whining they do about animal experimentation, I think deep down inside they really love it. Alright, let's get down to this. Ultimately, because I'm getting tired of this, I'm finally, after weeks of arguing about utilitarianism with numerous people in real life. I mean, you guys listening to this think this is the first time I've said all this stuff, and it's not. I have been over this ground more times than I can keep track of. And after a month of this ongoing, has it been like a month, Randy? It has, hasn't it? After about a month of this ongoing debate, I am finally starting to get sick of utilitarianism. Ultimately, utilitarianism fails because it can simply never happen. A workable moral theory has to be possible to implement. And this is one of the things, I don't have the Rachel's book in here. At one point in the Rachel's book, he outlines what he thinks is important for something to be a satisfactory moral theory. One of the things he's happy to leave out of that is that his definition of a satisfaction, well, you know what, Randy, can you go find the book? Because I don't want to screw this up. Because you see, I don't have to screw this up because I'm always right. Yeah, no, just hold it. Yeah, find it. Just hold it up to the window. I'm not gonna. I could unlock the. I haven't made a sexist joke all day, have I? I could actually unlock the door without you kicking me in the testicles. I'm trying to think if I trust you. You got it? For those of you who don't normally listen to Stating the Obvious, typically I make a sexist joke at some point during every edition. It's okay because Randy gets her shots in also. We're definitely all about harassing each other around here. Perfect. There you go. The minimum concept of morality. This is according to James Rachel's from The Elements of Moral Philosophy. The minimum conception may now be stated very briefly. Morality is, at the very least, the effort to guide one's conduct by reason, that is, to do what there are the best reasons for doing, while giving equal weight to the interest of each individual who will be affected by what one does. Right, and I'm looking to see because it's okay. Well, it's not. I'm trying to think if there's someplace else in there that he defines moral theory better. Okay, the point is, what he leaves out of that is that this conception of morality has to actually be workable. Is the effort to guide one's conduct by reason, blah, 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 blah. He doesn't mention anything about how it has to actually be workable in real life on the planet Earth with human beings. I'm trying to find my notes. Where did I leave off at? Right, so why is utilitarianism not a workable moral theory? Number one, utilitarianism is about creating the greatest amount of happiness and minimizing the amount of pain in the world. The greatest quality and quantity of happiness, I should say. To do this, you must calculate the calculus of felicity for each possible action. Number three, to calculate the calculus of felicity, you must be amazingly intelligent and all-knowing to figure out how and to what degree any given outcome is going to affect every human and animal involved. Providing, of course, we were capable of doing that. Number four is that you must then have the power to enforce whichever course of action is determined to be ethically correct. Utilitarianism can only exist if we find out the equation in the point system for the calculus of felicity. I got to fix my notes again. Actually, we know in the equation. This is old notes. I'm in Gaga land now. Utilitarianism can only exist if we find out the point system for the calculus of felicity and have the capability to run these calculations for every possible action. Run calculations. Right. I'm sorry, guys. Folks, I am writing. It can also only exist if we have an all-powerful and all-knowing government, which is kind of like God, but of course utilitarians don't believe in God. And I just thought of this. That's why I was silent there. Utilitarians say that you should do whatever creates the greatest amount of happiness, and that there's got to be some entity that's going to figure this out and then enforce it. Now, isn't that the same thing as what the Christians say with God? That God knows everything, God knows what's best for you, and God loves you, and that like when your sister dies, that's because God knows what He's doing, and you're not supposed to question His ways. Isn't utilitarianism Christianity without God? In utilitarianism, the government knows what it's doing. I almost called it God. In utilitarianism, the government knows what it's doing. The government knows what's best for you because it's done the calculus of felicity, and so you should shut up and do what you're told to do. It's utilitarianism is Christianity without God. I just thought of that. That's good. I'll have to work on refining that idea and see if it holds up or not. I'm ending this off with some weaknesses of utilitarianism that I got from a very good website on the internet. The link is provided in the notes. According to this professor, this guy's a professor at a college, I don't remember where. URI, whatever URI is. He lists 4 weaknesses of utilitarianism. Number 1, the concept of happiness is not clear, very vague, equated either with pleasures or with the public good. And that's seen there. And this is true. So, is happiness just purely hedonistic pleasure, or is it the public good? Is it a balance between there? How do you find that? Again, how do we decide where that is and what that is, and assign this point value and do the calculus of felicity? Weakness number 2, measurements and units of happiness are arbitrary and subjective. I've been saying it all along. Utilitarianism is completely subjective. Utilitarianism is where the utilitarian decides that his opinion is what's right and then attempts to force it on everybody else. I don't know how many goddamn times I've fucking repeated that. Utilitarianism is about doing about forcing other people to do what you think is right. Number 3, The social, altruistic component could be too demanding if pursued strictly. Again, we can see that this is true is simply in the fact that people who are utilitarians, such as Speer, don't do a fucking thing to help all of these people who, there's this child who keeps dying every 6 seconds, and Speer's not doing a fucking thing to help him. I'm sure Speer has more clothes than he needs. I'm sure he has more books than he needs. I'm sure he's thrown away some food in his life. I'm sure he's making more money than he needs to survive. So whenever a utilitarian throws some shit at you about how you have to help people in the third world countries, the answer to that is real simple. If you give a fuck, go do something about it. So obviously, the social component of utilitarianism is too demanding even for people who believe in utilitarianism. And that is, of course, why they want to use the power of the government to force the rest of us to do these things like feed these children in the third world, because they don't want to do it, because they don't want to be inconvenienced, and they don't want to feel the guilt over the fact that they're not doing anything about it. So in order to relieve themselves of that guilt, they're going to force you to do the things that they don't have the spine to do themselves, because, as I've said before, you're cowards. Weakness number 4. Disregard for motives and intrinsic values could lead to immoral and unjust consequences. Now, I kind of wonder about that one, because under utilitarian, yeah, and see, this is the thing. Under utilitarianism, how do you decide something's immoral or unjust? Because you simply decide if it's immoral and unjust based on whether or not it creates happiness. I think the utilitarian response to that would be that if you did the calculus of felicity and you did whatever you thought was the... Excuse me, water. Needed a drink there. I think the utilitarian response would be that if you did the calculus of felicity and then you did that thing which you thought would create the greatest amount of happiness, and you were wrong, that outcome, because it did not work the way you wanted it to, would be immoral and unjust. But I think you would also have to say that that was a mistake, and that's where the problem comes in for me, is that since humans are fallible, you can make mistakes like this and end up with immoral or unjust consequences. Okay, so maybe I do see his point on number 4. We just sort of arrived at it in a different way. I would take number 4, I would approach it more from the fact that the human beings who are going to be doing this calculus of felicity and going to be creating these measurements and units of happiness, these people who are doing this, not only are they working with something arbitrary and subjective, but they themselves are fallible and could make mistakes in the process. Whew. Yeah. We're done except for the debate. One more section to go, and I will be free of this albatross. Now I've got to go find my notes from the debate. I know they're here somewhere. What I'm going to have to do is just dump out all my stuff off my clipboard and out of my notebook and just spread it out and go through it. It's going to be a mess. So anyway, we'll be back soon.